And welcome to another at-home edition of MLB Tonight, presented by Camping World. Great images coming in from Tampa Bay over the last day, and we all hope that this is a harbinger of things to come. The Rays holding a voluntary workout at Tropicana Field. Kevin Cash was there in an observing manner. There was a big participation factor there as well. A lot of players showing up, eager to get back to the field, as we all are as well. Matt Vasgersian, and courtesy of NTT Home Play Cam, Dan Plesac, and Harold Reynolds. Dan, you got to think that this is perhaps maybe a sign that good things are on the horizon?
Man, I sure hope so. I think we're getting almost into the month of June, and if we really realistically want to try to have baseball sometime in early July, an agreement is going to have to be struck sometime soon. But it is nice, Matt, to see players back in their arena working out, and as the Rays were in Tampa, it certainly seems like it's a good sign.
Hey, the one thing, Matt, I did notice in talking with some guys from Arizona, what they're doing is guys will drive up to the ballpark. They go up the elevator. They're the only one there. They have their gloves, their masks. They go down on the field, and they hit at a certain time. And each pitching coach or hitting coach, whoever's throwing batting practice, has his own bucket of balls with his name on it. He's the only one that touches them. The players hit. He picks the balls up. They leave. That's kind of what they were doing in Arizona.
You know, a little bit more on the state of the state from a big picture standpoint. The Players Association was handed a proposal late Tuesday night documenting all the details for getting back to the field. And while both sides are taking their time pouring through it and not every detail has been made public, that information includes a new pay scale for players whereby the highest paid players take the biggest hit, quote unquote, if you will. It's a sliding scale for decreased pay, not dissimilar to what other industries are doing across the country. You know, in addition to that, the player safety component is important as well. And without having read every page of it ourselves, Harold, give me your thoughts toward the proposal that was made on Tuesday.
Well, you're going to have a sliding scale, no matter if it was back when we were going through strikes or not. The bigger guys are always the ones that are going to get hit the most because you make the most money. I find it interesting that you start looking at a lot of the top salaries are pitchers. And when you're looking at now guys saying, hey, I got to have my money, as in Blake Snell with his $7 million he needs, at this point in time, he's probably going to have 10 starts. So on a scale, he's still making pretty good money. But it's always hard when you start talking about finances. I don't care if it's in our industry or in professional sports where the numbers are a lot bigger. It's always going to be difficult, but the big guys are going to get hit. That's just the way it is.
You know, Harold, and I agree with you. And I think one of the things, this is not only here in America, but this has been a worldwide pandemic. And 2020 it's just a different calendar year. Nobody really has a handle yet on what the financial page will be at the end of the year. There's some cause that this virus may kick back up again in the fall. So I think from the player side and from the owner's side of view, it's really uncharted water. I do know this. There are millions of people that want to watch some live baseball on TV. So let's keep our fingers crossed that they can come to a resolution and start playing some baseball in July.
Yeah, I mean, we've missed a lot of mile markers in the season already. Holiday games and celebrations, league-wide causes have come and gone. And the Washington Nationals, for one, could wait no longer to do their ring ceremony from their World Series triumph of 2019. It was done virtually over the weekend. Here it is with a baby shark etched into the inside. A beautiful ring. Give me your gut reaction on this piece of jewelry, Dan Plesac.
I'd like to have one, Matt. That's something I've never been able to get my hands on or be in a World Series. But there's a look at Steven Strasburg's ring right there. What an amazing run. When you think about it, Matt, to do what they did in the wild card game, it looked like they were doomed against Josh Hader and the Brewers. And how their season and history changed in one inning. They looked like they were going home, and the next thing you know, they keep advancing and they win the whole thing.
You know what? It's interesting. I think they really did capture the essence of what this whole thing was. It was the baby shark down the stretch. I mean, you think back some of the World Series wins, the Thunder Sticks in Anaheim. I'll never forget that. You know, you're not going to forget the rally monkey How about the squirrel? This was a sight in Washington. I think they captured it. They didn't put it out front on top of the ring. It's on the inside. But that was a huge part of their whole run down the stretch. That's what I will remember in 2019 about the Washington Nationals.
I'm pretty sure they never considered putting it on the top of the ring. In lieu of an actual gem, they put a picture of a baby shark on the top of the ring. Very cool.
Probably a little bit cheaper.
Probably a lot cheaper. All right, guys, we're going to move on and take a quick break. When we come back, as we know, the June draft is only weeks away. We'll look back on some memorable drafts that took place at our Studio 42 and preview the class of 2020 next.
MLB Tonight is presented by Camping World, making RVing fun and easy since 1966. Visit campingworld.com today.
Well, the June draft is right around the corner, as we know, and even for the most seasoned baseball executives, this year's draft presents unique challenges, the likes of which nobody has ever gone through before. Our Dan O'Dowd counts among those seasoned professionals when we talk about player development and the draft. Dan, the challenges of this year's draft at face value are pretty clear. You can't put people out there to get your eyes on players. What else about the unique circumstances this year is going to make the draft so difficult?
Well, Matty, I think you hit the nail on the head, though. I mean, the draft every year is a challenge into itself. It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle that you're trying to put together overall and for each individual player. And, getting that ability to touch the player, feel the player, and watch that player play as many Zoom calls as you may want to have. The game is played in between the white lines, and the player tells a story in between that white line, whether it's batting practice or infield practice or watches bullpen sessions. It's a collection of information that you try to then apply in a process that allows you to be successful. This year, you're going to have a lot of incomplete information on each and every player.
Well, and in the minds of many, kind of an incomplete process, but for reasons we know to be very accurate and very valid, the league decided to go only 5 rounds deep this year because of the environment that we're in. What happens after the 5 rounds? Is everybody undrafted then a free agent?
It is. If you're draft eligible, you're able to sign for $20,000 or college scholarship plan if you're still in college or a high school player. And so that's going to be an interesting process because it's the first time players can actually choose where they're going to go to. And, clubs are going to have a limit on the number of players they can bring in, but they still are going to be very, very aggressive, Matty, in trying to bring in the premium juniors that show they want to sign or seniors that will definitely be available. Not sure how many high school players will fall into that category. But I think it's going to be a very competitive environment, almost harking back to the days, Matty, prior when there really was a draft.
I know that one of the unintended consequences, Dan, of limiting the draft to just 5 rounds is a possible thinning of each organization's player development department, which is terrible in our business. What else might happen as a result of only 5 rounds of drafting this summer?
Well, a couple things. Number one, I think you're going to see less big leaguers that have come for the draft at any point in time within our history. Because when you eliminate rounds 6 through up, just 6 through 10, you can look at all the big leaguers that are scattered across big league teams that came in those rounds. It's still the most cost-effective, efficient way to develop a viable product on the field. I also think, Matty, something that hasn't been talked about very much is the pressure it's going to put on your international and your Latin American programs to be very, very successful.
I know that you still prepare for this, Dan, as though you're doing it yourself and running a club still. And we benefit from a lot of your insights as you'll be a part of the draft coverage here on MLB Network. Give us one player that you're most excited about, or at least intrigued with this year.
Well, I'm excited about a lot of them. First of all, I'm going to tell you personally, I've had a chance to see a lot of these high school kids over a number of years, just simply because my son Jack was on that same trajectory of playing with a lot of these kids. So I was blessed to actually see these kids perform in between the white lines. I got to see them how to interact with their teammates, how they handle success or failure. I think this, for me, is one of the deeper drafts that I've seen in a long time, probably since 2014, which I thought was an incredible draft. I do think a lot of high school kids won't be part of it because they come with so much greater risk when there's this much incomplete information out there on them. But one high school player in particular that really excites me is a young shortstop in Chicago, a high school player named Eddie Howard. Just a pure defensive shortstop, Matt. Tremendous actions defensively, very graceful, really accurate arm, moves well laterally, does everything under control. I heard some lower grades on the bat. I think the bat's going to be very, very good. And if you want to dream a little bit on this kind of player, you can dream a little bit like a Barry Larkin. I mean, I do think this kid has a chance to be special, and I think he's going to fall deeper in the draft. And I think one club in particular who takes him is going to look back at this draft in 10 years and realize they got a really special player.
Wow. There's so many things that make this intriguing. Coming up on MLB Network, the June draft, we'll have it live right here. Dan O'Dowd will be a part of the coverage. Dan, as always, thanks for the insights.
Thanks, Matty.
Well, Ed Howard does not appear on MLB.com's top 10 prospect list, but here they are, and we'll tip our cap to James Bond fans everywhere when we highlight Austin Martin at number 2. It is interesting, though, as I'm rejoined by Harold Reynolds, that 3 of the top 5 are position players. Harold, what do you see in this list?
Yeah, no, I would have had Ed Howard in that top 10 for sure because he's one of the top position players. But you did mention 3 of the top 5 position players. So let's go to the top guy, Spencer Torkelson from Arizona State. You know, the thing I've seen with this guy, a lot of people are talking about Pete Alonso because of the power. And this guy has got great plate discipline. He's got great power. You see right there, Matt, he can turn a ball around on the inside. He's going to hit a ball the opposite way as well. You know, here's a guy not drafted out of high school, and now he'll possibly be the 1-1 overall. But I think his defense has improved so much that I think he can handle it over there defensively. Not a liability. I think he's more advanced defensively than Pete Alonso. I don't know if the bat's where Pete's at. But the plate discipline, he recognizes the ball early. I love how he picks balls up and is able to lay off and really have great plate discipline. And I think this is the separator of him than most other college hitters right now. He is really advanced in his approach, and that's why so many scouts are on top of him, and he will be the number 1 pick. The next guy that really stands out is the number 2 guy, and that's Austin Martin from Vanderbilt. He's a perfect modern-day player, Matt. Plays short, plays the outfield, plays second, plays third. You can put him basically anywhere on a diamond. And you know, that is what people love in today's game with the versatility. You see him there make a play, but I like his hands. He struggled a little bit defensively at third base, so that's why they ended up moving him around. But the bat can play. He can hit, covers the zone. He's a little more, not quite as advanced as Torkelson, but he can flat out hit. And he's a gamer, man, really fights, competitor. And then this guy right here, Nick Gonzalez, the more I watch video of him, he's number 5 ranked right now. I think he's the best college player in the country if it was just flat out playing a baseball game. Here's some video, Matt. He hit 5 home runs in a doubleheader this year. And I had to ask, was it the socks? Because he's an Aaron Judge fan. He had to wear some Aaron Judge socks. And Aaron actually called him after that game and had a great conversation. They've struck up a friendship. But this guy covers everything. I think there's not his swing is more prepared for being able to hit every pitch in the zone. And that's what I like about him. And I say college player because he's using an aluminum bat, and I just don't know playing in New Mexico if the power plays because he got a lot of home runs in that high altitude. But as a baseball player, a college player, I think he might be the best college player in the country.
Wow, 5-homer doubleheader, and we saw 3 of them in that little rip that you showed us, and they were all to the opposite field.
Yeah, just flicking the bat, taking advantage of it. It's the socks, though. He had the Aaron Judge socks. Now, it's probably an Altuve Judge comparison because he's about 5'9", compared to Judge, who's 6'6".
It's an interesting list, and with Spencer Torkelson at the top, it reminds us that first basemen do not often go 1-1. In fact, it's only happened 3 times in the history of the draft. And the last time it happened, it was 20 years ago when the Marlins took Adrian Gonzalez with the first pick of the draft. If Spencer Torkelson goes 1-1, it will be significant. But I think we'd all agree, Harold, that this is a high first-round player at the very lowest.
Oh, yeah, he's got huge upside. I think he's going to hit quick. He'll get to the big leagues real fast. But again, I go back to his defense. He is a lot better defender than most people thought. Even my initial videos that I saw him on, I wasn't impressed. And the more I saw video of him and advanced through the season and through his college career, he got better and better and better. So I think there's a huge upside for him defensively as well.
The June draft, as we know, it's a combination from a club executive standpoint of art, science, and rolling the dice. And maybe that explains how years ago, back in 2009, the best player in the country and maybe one of the best players to ever take the field in the history of the game slipped into the 20s, grabbed by the Angels. How that went down. Next on MLB Tonight.
Home Plate Cam is presented by NTT. MLB Tonight is presented by Blue Emu Maximum Pain Relief. Works fast and you won't stink. The official pain relief cream of Major League Baseball.
Trout is one of the greatest ball players we will ever see in our lifetimes.
That is out to deep left field. Big fly.
Mike Trout continues to do some big damage.
He's so good, he's good at everything.
Trout is going back. He jumps up and he takes a home run away.
MVP's doing MVP things.
Mike Trout, he's the greatest of the great.
There are many who believe that it's not too early to count Mike Trout as one of the greatest all-time baseball players, and these numbers certainly back up that statement. So you'd think that in terms of the draft, talent like Mike Trout's would have been recognized as the first or second overall pick back in 2009. That was not the case. Let's look back as to how Mike Trout slipped in his draft class.
The longer I've been doing this job, the harder it is to get out and go see kids. I mean, especially, a kid who lives in Millville, New Jersey, which, by the way, is a flight cross country to Philadelphia and about an hour-plus drive up to Millville, right? But our scouting staff kept telling us, hey, this kid, you got to go see this kid. So we take this cross-country flight. I remember that sandwich shop because it'll haunt me the rest of my life. And we go see the kid, and our scouting staff loved him. The thing that's amazing about that day was I believe he went 0 for 5, and I believe he popped up like 4 of the 5 times. But you could tell he was an athletic kid.
My senior year was a lot of pressure. I got to know the scouts pretty well. Greg Morehart, he was a scout for the Angels, and that was really high on me.
And as luck would have it, Morehart, the Angels' East Coast scout, had been teammates with Jeff Trout during their minor league days in the Twins system in the 80s.
I've known Jeff and Debbie since 1984 when I had signed.
I didn't even know he was scouting. I had lost track of him. And then when he started to follow Mikey around, he really, really liked what he saw, and I could trust him.
I remember as a player playing against McGuire, against Bonds, against these type of players. Mike, at 17 years old, was as good as, if not better, with more power and more speed. And in the scouting report, I said, hey, he's got a chance to be a Hall of Fame player. Now, that's a crazy thing to write when somebody's 17 years old. But when you have a reference point of those type of players, well, he's as good as those players at that age, so he's got a chance.
Greg Morehart bragged on Mike the whole time. But the first time I ever saw him was a high school game in New Jersey. He got a base hit, and I told our scout that was with me, I said, let's go. We left in the 5th inning. And he said, why are we leaving? I said, well, we're going to take him if he's there. But he won't be there when we pick. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, he's got something about him, the it factor.
There is Mike Trout. Mike Trout from Millville High School in New Jersey, waiting to hear his name called. He's joining us here live inside Studio 42.
We went up there, and my thought process was, well, how about if he slips? There's no guarantee. Nobody said, we're drafting you, Mike. This is where you're going. There was no guarantee, not even from the Angels, not from anybody.
With the first selection, the Washington Nationals select Steven Strasburg.
This is Mike Trout from the Northeast, who had a lot of people talking nice about him, but a lot of teams passed on him.
The second selection, the 5th selection, the 7th selection.
It didn't take long that night for the realization to set in about just how much it would take for a team to pick a kid with Trout's unlikely profile and background.
when you're a player in New Jersey, you do know there's some bias against you. And as a result, there'll always be a little bit of a doubt about really how good you are, no matter what you do. Well, that kid looks really good, but he's doing it in Jersey. Well, let's see what happens if he played 40, 50, 60 games in high school in Texas.
Yeah, it was tough because you couldn't get recognized. A lot of people don't know about, obviously Millville, New Jersey.
With the 8th selection, 10th selection.
We were sitting there watching, and he was slipping down a little bit, and you're getting a little bit nervous.
And I really was really nervous about this. But
it's funny because I wasn't.
No.
I don't know why I wasn't, but I wasn't.
I just didn't want it to be a moment where he slips and he doesn't get picked and we're up there and boy, and the camera's, coming to you.
With the 12th selection.
What's going through your mind as you're waiting for this to happen?
I'm nervous, and it's a dream come true, hopefully.
I wasn't hearing my name call. I knew I was going to just sweat it out. You go up to the draft, you want to get drafted on the first day.
The Oakland A's are now on the clock.
We're between two guys. It was, and Mike was one of them. And I'm sure every guy says this story that didn't take him. But we're going, no, we saw him, we liked him, 0 for 5. We didn't get to see him run. We don't know if we can't validate that.
The Oakland Athletics select Grant Green.
Gulp.
The Cleveland Indians select Alex White. Bobby Borchering, Chad James, a left-hander.
Really, you're just hoping, can somehow Mike get to 24 and 25? We had 24 and 25.
With the 25th selection in the first round of the 2009 first-year player draft, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim select Michael Trout.
I was just happy the Angels picked me. You work all your life to become a professional athlete, and when you have the opportunity to, it means a lot to you.
Mike Trout of Millville High School. There you see him holding up an Angels jersey.
We'll never forget it, and it was one of the great nights of our lives, that's for sure.
We got him. We got the Kingfish. I mean, we got him, and he's ours.
We knew we had a tremendous talent, but I'd be kidding you if I said that I knew he was going to be Mike Trout. People messed up. He shouldn't have been there 25, but we'd gladly take it.
Until the next junior comes along or the next Barry Bonds comes along, he's going to be the one that got away.
He's the one that got away from a lot of people. As we talk about that draft class, guys, and we all remember it so well, being our first at MLB Network, 24 players taken in front of Mike Trout that year. 6 of them never even made it to the big leagues, Harold. It is a very inexact science.
I tell you what, I remember that night sitting there and hoping, and I'm looking over my shoulder, and he's still sitting in the dugout. And that night cemented Mike Trout as, we're not supposed to root for players in this business, right? But he cemented Mike Trout as our own. We claim him here at the network. To agonize with him and the family, to have talked with them heading up to the draft and being excited for him to see the agony that they went through. He just became one of ours. And to see what he's become now, it's almost like the proud brother or son that you might have, Dan. And I know you agree. He became our guy at the network.
He did, Harold. And that's why I think baseball is the most hard sport to predict long-term if you're scouting. You have to scout college players. You have to scout high school players. And it's really hard looking at a 17, 18-year-old high school kid and project what you may see down the road. And as we've seen, there are very, very few sure things in baseball. And it's even more in inexact science when it comes to the draft. We've seen very polished college players that we feel are close to being ready for the big leagues. And I love the clip of Mike Trout, particularly his parents being involved. They were nervous, made the trip up to the network studios. And could you imagine how nervous he must have been as these numbers and these names keep going and going? A guy that thought he may go in the first half or the middle of the first round, and he lasts all the way to pick 25. An amazing story.
Question for both of you guys. Harold, why don't you tackle this first? Because that piece did such a nice job of explaining the regional bias, the geographical bias that was working against Mike Trout. Now that we've seen his success story, has that served as kind of a cautionary tale for people that might discount players from the Northeast too early?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think from now, even looking at the prospect development pipeline, the PDP that they have, and top 80 high school juniors in the country, the number of players now from the Northeast and the Northwest, those areas that are challenged because of the weather, and when you start the season, a lot more players are being looked at, taken more serious. I just think the upside potential, untapped potential, you see a lot more because California, Florida, Texas, those kids are playing a lot of baseball year round. And in the Northwest, those cold areas, and even in Dan's area over near Chicago, you don't get outside. So your talent is going to continue to grow. And I think sometimes California, Texas, Florida, those kids peak a little sooner. So yes, Matt, they're getting a deeper look now, and understandably so, that Mike Trout and others have opened that door.
And I think, Matt, what it's done too, it's opened the door in the Midwest and Northeast, particularly to pitchers, because, you know, you look at all of the injuries we've had in baseball, and you have some of these college programs in the 80s, 90s, and 2000 that were, 60, 70, 80 game schedule. These amateur pitchers were logging a lot of innings in their college season. And now if you have the foresight to look at a young pitcher, particularly in high school and also in college, and there isn't as much abuse and wear and tear on that arm, which is going to save a guy later on during his professional career. So it takes a scout to be able to look beyond the player that you're looking at today and project what his body could be and what his throwing mechanics and what his running is like, and try to project what that guy could be, not today, but tomorrow, when it really counts for an organization.
You never know when you're going to find that gem in the draft. Certainly a good chance in the first round. And in the case of former Red Sox great Kevin Youkilis, it happened in the 8th round. Around the 240s is when Uke came out. What's he up to now? Busier than when he played. We'll talk to him about it next on MLB Tonight. Welcome back to MLB Tonight, presented by Camping World. Well, three-time All-Star Kevin Youkilis spent a decade in the big leagues. He rode off into the sunset as a player following the 2013 season and has been very busy since, as he'll tell us himself. Kevin joins us on MLB Tonight. So with all the ex-teammates that you had in the big leagues, and I'll even count your minor league ex-teammates, and you played a long time, a decade, who were among the first players to try to fly you for free beer when they learned that their ex-teammate had his own label?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Nick Punto, good buddy. And then David Wells had been in Loma. So pretty cool to have those two guys come in there.
That's awesome. Putting it all together there. Hey, speaking of ex-teammates, I want to ask you about one who you never actually took the field with, but since your last year in the big leagues was with the Yankees, and technically you were teammates with Derek Jeter, though you guys were hurt at different times and never took the field together, you knew him more as an opponent. So when I ask you, what was it like playing against Derek Jeter, and when did you know, at what point did you know he was as good as he was? How would you respond to that?
Great question. I mean, I think, everyone got to see his excellence over the years. He was there before me. So when I got up to the major leagues, he was one guy that I was really excited to just go against and play against, and just stand at second base and Derek Jeter tell you, hey, man, nice swing. It was one of the coolest things ever. I'll never forget that moment. But he was just such a great competitor. Just always battled every at bat, was a tough out in the field, would just try to do all the little things to make the plays. And I was so lucky to play with him on the WBC team, and that was just such a cool experience getting to play with him. And just I think all the guys around the major leagues just totally respect Derek Jeter for all the things he did on the field. And for me to have that experience of playing on the same WBC team and representing USA together was one of the best moments of my career.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about your WBC experience really reverentially and fondly in the past. That is one of the things, unfortunately, that this COVID-19 pandemic has taken away from us. It was scheduled to come up in the radar pretty soon, and that's going to be put off indefinitely now. I don't know how many of your ex-teammates or how many current players you speak to, but what do you make of the current situation, and are you optimistic that we'll have baseball this year?
Yeah, this has just been an unbelievable turn of events for sports, but just every business in general. I mean, dealing with my business, a loan brewing company, and all the hardships of having to lay people off, it's been really rough. And I think sports have been so huge to our society and entertaining us and keeping us away from the pressures of our jobs or relationships and all the other little things that we deal with. And it's kind of sad. I mean, especially with the WBC, I think it was one of the coolest experiences because you're representing your country and playing against even some of your own teammates. And I thought that was always the most fun part, was going up and facing a pitcher that was on your own team. And so you had little bragging rights when you get back to your respected ball clubs. So yeah, it's tough. But for me, I'm always trying to be optimistic that something will happen. But it just seems like, just reading through all the fine print that's going back and forth, it doesn't look as optimistic in my opinion. But like, during this time, we've learned that what you feel today is going to change a week from now. So hopefully I feel great a week from now, and the players and Major League Baseball come to an agreement, and we get to see some baseball this year.
Yeah, really good point. Hey, before we let you go, not that you have a lot of free time running your own company with this burgeoning beer business on your hands, but you're getting into the podcasting world as well, we understand. So I want to know, on your podcast, did you have information and did you let your listeners know when your brother-in-law was on the verge of signing and leaving New England and signing in Tampa Bay? Did you kind of peek into the curtain of that for your listeners a little earlier than the rest of us schlubs read about it in the newspaper?
The funny thing about that is the podcast is going to be called the Greek God of Hops podcast. It's going to launch here on June 1st with Mudhouse Media. That's with 2 Ds, mudhousemedia.com. And, with Tommy, he kept it pretty quiet with us. We've always just sat back and just let him do his thing. And, for me, I don't put a lot out there on social media just because we don't want to talk too much. We don't want to give off too much information. Tommy is very good at keeping it all in house, and he did a great job.
Very good, very good. Your family sounds a lot like mine, by the way. You just gotta swallow everything, man. Uke, it's good to talk to you. Good to see you, man. We'll look for the podcast, Greek God of Hops. We'll look for the beer, and we appreciate you taking some time with us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. LomaBrew.com and Loma-Coffee.com. Check it out, and if you're in California, swing on by.
When we come back, the Big Hurt's career was filled with big moments, birthday salutations, and our favorite Frank Thomas highlights next on MLB Tonight.
MLB Tonight is presented by Camping World, making RVing fun and easy since 1966. Visit campingworld.com today.
Time for Winning Together, presented by Doosan. And a happy 52nd birthday to Hall of Famer Frank Thomas. My favorite Hurt moment, a pair of homers in Game 1 of the 2006 ALDS against the Twins. It's a great pitching matchup. A's won it 3-2, and Hurt was 38 years old for that 1 year he had in Oakland. Most of his big moments, of course, with the White Sox, though, guys, and I'm sure that's where you're going to go. Harold?
Yeah, for me, it was watching this big guy when he first broke in. I remember when he was a rookie, and it was like, who is this guy, this big old football player? And his swing, he did not swing and miss, put the ball in play. It was kind of uncanny at the time, but his hand-eye coordination was second to none. And he hit the ball so hard consistently. That's what stood out to me in my mind. And Dan, I know you had to face him, but looking at this career resume right here, White Sox, A's, Blue Jays, we all had different times he may have stood out. Matt talked about the A's, but Dan, I'm telling you, his ability to put the bat on the ball was second to none.
You know, Harold, I was fortunate enough to see his debut. I was playing for the Milwaukee Brewers, and there was a lot of hoopla that came around with Frank Thomas. One, because he was from Auburn, and at that time, Bo Jackson had already made his name as a big, strong football player turned into baseball. And when Frank Thomas came up, I think that's one of the cooler names that Hawk Harrelson has ever labeled on a player, the Big Hurt. And I remember sitting out in the bullpen, and you're starting to hear, hey, this guy, the Big Hurt. They call this guy the Big Hurt. And the more and more you saw him, you touched on it, Harold, he was a rare blend of a guy that was big and strong, but he didn't swing at a lot of bad pitches. He could rifle the ball to right field. If you made a mistake on the inner half of the plate, he could hit the ball out of the ballpark.
Man, my favorite Frank Thomas moment of all time is one we couldn't find on videotape when he was hitting grapefruits off a tee on the David Letterman show years and years ago. And there's so much to love about Frank. That's why we wanted to wish him a happy birthday. He shares a birthday with another Hall of Famer, by the way. Happy birthday to Jeff Bagwell, celebrating a special day today as well. Did Derek Jeter ever hit grapefruits off a tee into a live studio audience? I don't think so. But we will celebrate the captain and Hall of Famer over the weekend on MLB Network. A little preview of that is coming up next.
Winning Together is presented by Doosan. Doosan and MLB remind you to stay at home and stop the spread.
Welcome back to MLB Tonight, presented by Camping World.
There was only one time I ever saw Derek nervous in his career. It was his last game at Yankee Stadium.
He seems to be taking it in, looking around the ballpark, taking deep, heavy breaths.
I sensed a lot of emotion in him that day, and there were so many things that were probably going through his mind about his career and the appreciation the fans had for Derek.
Here's Derek Jeter with the winning run at second and one out in the ninth inning.
Watching him walk up in that situation with the base runner on and us needing a game-winning hit, we'd seen it so many times.
Derek Jeter has always been about the moment, the big moment. He owns the moment. Does he have one more moment in him here at Yankee Stadium?
A base hit to right. Here comes Richardson. The throw is close, but he scores. How about on a walk-off hit by Derek Jeter.
Derek Jeter ends his final game with a walk-off single. Did you have any doubt?
We all loved it. We all thought it was so fitting for his career to end with his base hit to right field that he had done so many times, the game-winning RBI.
And like we've seen for 20 years, the Jeterian single to right field. In the final game at Yankee Stadium, Derek Jeter singles the winning run home in the bottom of the ninth inning.
He's always come through in some of the biggest moments in Yankee history. It couldn't have ended more fitting.
To the very end, a charmed baseball life.
There was magic that night in the Bronx, as there was on so many occasions when Derek Jeter took the field. We'll celebrate the captain and Hall of Famer weekend long, beginning on Friday. A look back at his greatest moments all weekend on MLB Network. We know as fans what a thrill it was to watch him play, but what was it like from a manager's perspective to write his name in the lineup card every night?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Yankee Stadium. At shortstop, number 2, Derek Jeter. Number 2.
When I think of Derek Jeter, I think of somebody who showed up for work every day.
When I look back at Derek's career, the first thing that comes into my mind is all he wanted to do was play baseball and win championships. And there was never a situation that was too big for him.
When I think about Derek, I think about the very first spring training he comes to. And he was just a skinny kid, looked out of place. And then like 3 years later, you're kind of going, wow, man, this dude got so much better in that short period of time.
Very impressive, 21 years old. It was both our first years with the Yankees. It was a marriage made in heaven as far as I was concerned, because he was the backbone of that ball club.
I had an interesting perspective of being able to play alongside him and then being able to manage him. And I never had to worry if I was going to come in that there was a reason that he couldn't play And that's a manager's dream, to know where guys are going to be in the lineup every day and that you can count on someone.
I don't think you think of the toughness of Derek. I think that's one thing people really don't understand. To me, one of the toughest competitors and tough-minded guys in understanding how to keep the moment, small or keep it under control.
It was the personality that his parents gave to him and the upbringing that he had and his ability to be comfortable in any situation. He just seemed to be a natural. And I think it comes down to a belief in yourself.
He wasn't overly affected by the notoriety. He was a superstar, but he didn't act like it. And the fans gradually grew to love Derek Jeter.
When you think of iconic people in sports, you think of Michael. It goes with Chicago. You think of Magic. It goes with LA. You think of Derek, and it goes with New York.
Horses for courses, I guess. And Derek Jeter in New York was probably as popular as Joe DiMaggio. And that's saying something.
Derek Jeter! Derek Jeter!
Derek, for me, it's been an honor to have watched your whole career from the time you started through the end of it, and now to be able to continue to work with you. So proud to have known and watch you do your thing.
Hey, Derek, I just want to thank you for the guy that you were, the way you represented baseball and the New York Yankees, the great teammate you were, and the great player you were to manage.
Derek, I just want to say, I know you're going to pretend this is no big deal, but it is a big deal, pal, because when you look around in Cooperstown, there are a bunch of Hall of Famers there, and you're one of them. Nice going.
I've known Derek since, 1996, and he's the same guy then as he is today. And I think when you look at Joe Torre, it reminds me so much of his dad. And I think because he had Joe Torre in those formidable years of him going from a rookie to a superstar, I think it really gave Derek a huge foundation. Joe Torre was a great, great baseball player. He had a chance to be a Hall of Famer as a player himself. And to have as a manager, a guy who's been through it like that, I think that really helped Derek continue to cement that as a baseball player. But I tell you, he never changed from 96 to now. He's always been open to people, very engaging. You see him all the time. It's not an act. It's a real deal, and that's who he is.
Harold, we're not supposed to have favorite players or teams to root for, but I can tell you, I root for Derek Jeter. And that last at bat, when he drove in that run with that opposite field single, you and I were doing that show on MLB Tonight. And I don't think that you or I were as ever more enthused or genuinely fired up and hoping for a guy to get a base hit than we were when Derek Jeter was able to hit that ball through the right side. You and I were high-fiving. It was one of the cooler moments on all my days at MLB Network.
We covered it all today, fellas, from the draft all the way through the Hall of Fame. Thanks for watching. We'll see you here again on Friday.